Part 16. The Prince is Very Fierce. Author, Guan Gongzi. Chapter 151. It is approaching February, spring has not yet arrived, and the willows all over the city are already showing a bit of green. At noon, Su Buling walked out of the palace gate, got on his horse and headed to Sun's shop in Daifang. Because the Queen Mother was so angry before entering the palace that she didn't even have a sip of tea, not to mention meals. However, after some heart-to-heart talk, he finally persuaded the Queen Mother to quietly interrogate him. As for the outcome, it seems we can only wait. Speaking of which, after Nengqingyi heard that ridiculous detoxification method, it always felt weird to see the Queen Mother again. Well, I always thought of the scene where the Queen Mother rolled her eyes. However, there is no horoscope, so it is difficult to think deeply about it. Su Buling shook his head to get rid of the throbbing caused by adolescent hormones in his heart, and with a slight drive, he quickly arrived at the Bluestone Alley of Daifang. There are always a few drinkers sitting in the Sun's shop. Old Man Sun, as always, walks around in front of several large wine vats, serving drinks and dishes, and chatting with the drinkers about their comings and goings. "Shopkeeper, bring me a bottle of wine." "Okay, oops, the young master is here. Long time no see. I'm a little busy at the end of the year, so I don't have time to come over." Shopkeeper Sun smiled and took the vermilion wine gourd from Su Buling's hand, and poured the clear wine with a wine spoon. If it weren't for the servants who come here every day to drink, the little old man would have thought that the young master had stopped drinking. "Shopkeeper Sun's wine, I'm afraid no one can quit it after drinking it." Shopkeeper Sun nodded somewhat complacently, thought for a moment, and then sighed. A few days ago, there was a charlatan who was about to die, but he still managed to come over and take a bite. I don't know whether I should be happy or not. Su Buling had heard of such things, thought about it for a moment, shook his head and chuckled. Go out with a bowl of wine, and go on the road with a bowl of wine. After all, you have completed the journey. It is better than dying in a remote place with no hope. Not strong, in my opinion. I should be happy. Shopkeeper Sun nodded. That's true. Su Buling took the horse and waited for a while. Suddenly, he thought of the duaniasheo that Mrs. Lu had drunk him over, and asked. "By the way, Shopkeeper Sun, before the new year, someone at home came to buy 2 bottles of strong liquor. Although the taste is not that good, it is stronger than duaniasheo, which is really rare. Do you still have any here?" Shopkeeper Sun shook his head and smiled. "That's not wine, it's just strong, and it doesn't taste good. There is some left in the shop, which was originally used to marinate meat. If you don't mind it, you can just drink it. It's rare to find a drink that can knock me down, so I don't mind it." "That's okay." After a while, Shopkeeper Sun came out with a small wine bottle and handed it to Su Buling. "Hey, this person usually drinks the good and forgets the bad. The young master does the opposite. I'm nostalgic and I'm used to it." Su Buling opened the cork of the wine and smelled it. The smell of wine hit his nose. He nodded with satisfaction and led the horse away from the alley. Shopkeeper Sun put the towel on his shoulders, looked at the people and horses walking away, thought for a moment, and muttered, "It's good to remember the old, but I'm afraid that I will forget the old when I see the new." As soon as he finished speaking, a gentle voice responded from outside the railing of the wine shop. "As a man, it's natural to like the new and dislike the old. I'm afraid that I won't see the new." Shopkeeper Sun was stunned for a moment, then raised his head and glanced. Outside the wine shop, a middle-aged scholar appeared at some point. He had an elegant face and was in his 40s with a beard on his chin. He was holding a black oil paper umbrella in his hand, standing outside the railing of the wine shop. The probe looked at it. Shopkeeper Sun checked it carefully, with a bit of surprise in his eyes. "Xiao Su, didn't you quit the world and live in Zongnan Mountain for retirement? Why are you back?" Su Danking held the oil paper umbrella behind him and smiled helplessly. The person in the palace gave me a pen a few days ago. I won't accept it now. I guess it will be buried directly in Zongnan Mountain. I can only come out and travel around the world again. I didn't know you had other wines hidden before. Give me a sip too. Shopkeeper's son smiled as if seeing an old friend, took another bottle of wine and walked out, looking up and down. You get into trouble when you're drunk. You kid will go crazy when you're drunk. If you hadn't barged into the Kui family's peach blossom forest while drunk, and they are such a good girl, maybe I'd even come out to get drunk. Su Danking shook his head gently. Everyone has bad luck and good fortune. Who knew back then? I haven't started writing for more than 10 years. At first, I was arrogant and stopped writing. Now I don't dare to paint, but I can't do it without painting. Shopkeeper's son wiped his hands clean with a towel and sighed. You brothers, only Master Song is smart. You know that you can't look back after you enter the world. You started an official career from the beginning. Look at what they are doing now. The Imperial Academy is a big sacrifice. Regardless of whether the prince or the prince sees him, he has to call him sir. He is the only one among the tutor's students, so there is no comparison. Su Danking opened the cork of the wine with one hand, brought it to his nose and smelled it, then frowned. What kind of taste did that young man just now? He can still drink this. Shopkeeper's son curled his lips. Everyone has their own preferences. If you don't want to drink it, don't waste it. It's better to use it to marinate meat than to drink it. Su Danking looked at the wine pot for a moment, then smiled after thinking about it. I have to give it a try. Wine is like a beautiful woman. Originally, I only looked at the beauty's skin, but now I think about it, among ordinary-looking women, there are also unique beauties. Hey, I haven't seen you have a strong taste in more than 10 years. Don't draw a picture of the 8 ugly ones. It's too hurtful. I still want to live a few more years, but I don't have the courage. Hee hee. Other side. Su Buling rode through the neighborhoods and came to the small courtyard in the quiet alley. Although he had already learned about Ning Qingyi's departure from Lao Ba, Su Buling still came over to take a look. Pushing open the old courtyard door, the yard is neatly tidied. There are a few green sprouts under the corners. The water well is covered with a dustpan. The wine jars under the eaves are placed in a very eye-catching position. Each jar of wine represents Ning. Qingyi went to the shop to look for him once. Su Buling raised his eyebrows, walked under the eaves and took a look, and placed a note under the wine jar at the top. He removed the wine bottle and picked up the folded paper, and a few lines of elegant handwriting came into view. Mr. Su, in my haste to leave, I forgot to tell you one thing. If the detoxification method works, you owe Zhongli Chuchu your life. Remember to thank her in the future. It would be a pity to throw away these wines, it will be an advantage for you. Finally, Zhu Manzi is my confidant. If you dare to bully her, you and I will fight to the death. Farewell. Su Buling frowned, looked at a pile of wine bottles, shook his head and muttered. How can we say goodbye forever if we don't die forever? There's something wrong with the logic. Having said that, Su Buling still smiled. If the antidote was really effective, not to mention that he owed the blue-eyed girl a life, he could just pledge himself to her. As for Zhu Manzi, little Manzi is so cute, it's too late to hurt, how could he be bullied? The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 152. At dusk the next day, the Queen Mother's chariot left the palace in a light carriage and returned to her parents' home on the pretext of visiting relatives. The Xiao family mansion in the middle of Kuaishao Street is directly opposite the Lu family. Like the Lu family, it is only a temporary residence for family members who come to Beijing. Strictly speaking, it is not a serious prime minister's residence. The Queen Mother got off the carriage in front of the 2 stone lions and entered the palace with the accompanying maids. Due to her status, even the family elders who were originally called uncles had to come out to salute and greet her. However, Xiaoting, the Empress Dowager's beloved nephew, was hiding somewhere at this time, and no one could be found in the whole house. Naturally, the Queen Mother came here not to vent her anger on Xiaoting. After a few polite words with the housewife, she came to the residence at the back, where Prime Minister Xiao Chuang lived. The Xiao family worshipped the Prime Minister for generations throughout 3 dynasties, and their status was aloof and in line with the world. However, they were not as extravagant and lustful as the merchant princes, and they were even a little simple because of their strict family education. There are no cluttered mountains and seas and treasures in the house. Once the school, and residence are thrown away, there will be no place left to visit. Xiao Chuang's official status has always been hard to find fault with. He gained some fame in his teens. Because he was the second son, he was promoted to an official position like other Xiao family children, starting from the bottom and slowly working his way up. At first, Xiao Chuang was just the county magistrate of a small place near Lingnan. The mountains and rivers were so poor that even a horse could not escape, so Xiao Chuang walked around in the high mountains and ridges of the county. Because he had learned medical skills, he also carried a small medicine box with him. Treat the poor people who lack medical treatment and medicine. There are many children in the Xiao family, and there are even more with the surname Xiao. Xiao Chuang never disclosed his background when he was the county magistrate. Even his immediate superiors did not know that the barefoot magistrate was actually the legitimate son of the Xiao family in Huainan. Later, Xiao Chuang's father and eldest brother got sick one after another, so they called Xiao Chuang back from other places, and immediately became the prime minister after entering the capital, where he remains today. The courtyard where Xiao Chuang lived only had his wife and 2 old servants. Most of the rooms were empty. The remaining rooms were filled with various books and files. Because it was getting dark, only the study room had a light on. The Queen Mother was Xiao Chuang's youngest sister and was very familiar with the courtyard. After asking the accompanying maids to wait outside, she entered the courtyard alone and knocked on the door outside the study. Second brother. Soon, Xiao Chuang, who was wearing a Confucian shirt, opened the door. He first raised his hand and saluted according to the rules, see the Queen Mother, then he turned and walked back, sat down behind the large desk, picked up the half-read file, and raised his eyebrows. Didn't even raise it? Why are you back again? Can't you stay in the palace? As the saying goes, the eldest brother is the father. There was a huge age difference between the Queen Mother and Xiao Chuang, so as younger sisters, they were naturally a little scared. At this time, he entered the study with an upright posture and closed the door. He walked to the chair next to the desk and sat down. He hesitated for a moment. I'll come back and take a look. Well, a few days ago, the Holy One seemed to be appointing the top 10 warriors. The warriors are already powerful, and all the vassal kings and generals have heavy troops. Personal bravery has nothing to do with the overall situation. The Shiwa Kuei is just trying to appease the people who practice martial arts in the market. They fight secretly all day long and will do anything to gain a reputation. It's better to give them a name and let them fight for it. Oh. The Queen Mother nodded, thought about it for a moment, and chuckled. Su Buling is good at martial arts, can you be ranked in? Xiao Chuang said calmly, Eunuch Jia admires Su Buling very much, and originally wanted to rank him 10th. However, it would be beneath the status of the vassal king's son to compete with Jiang Huan, and the warrior would be dissatisfied if he decided directly. If Su Buling had just let him fight for it? The Queen Mother smiled and looked like she was recalling, Su Buling was infected by the dragon-locking poison, and his martial arts skills are incompetent. It is a bit difficult to compete for the top 10 martial arts leaders. I don't know when I will be able to get rid of the poison. By the way, I remember that during the Jiazi period when Baiyu was defeated, my grandfather led troops to annihilate the bandits. Locking dragon goo was rare in the world. Did my grandfather keep some at that time? After speaking, the Queen Mother carefully observed Xiao Chuanyang's face. What the Queen Mother didn't expect was that Xiao Chuanyang remained as calm as ever, turned the page of the book, and said casually. At that time, I kept one in Huainan. It's just a poisonous insect. I haven't found any way to raise the poison, so it's useless to keep it. The Queen Mother's eyes were full of astonishment. She was stunned for a long time before she came back to her senses and said slightly confused. Su Buletin was poisoned, and the court has been checking for dragon poison. Is it related to my Xiao family? Xiao Chuanyang shook his head. Originally, I just kept him at home. When my father was still there, banditry was rampant in the rivers and lakes. In order to prevent the loss of too many manpower, I secretly used it several times. Until the spring of the second year of Zhaohong, the imperial iron eagle hunted deer. All the masters came out but still couldn't do anything to Zhu Silk Mountain. The Kui family in Yuzhu is a family friend of my Xiao family. When I was a military advisor with my grandfather, when I knew about this, I came to ask me to borrow the dragon lock goo. I wrote a handwritten letter asking your sister to hand over the locking dragon goo to the Kui family. Ah! The Queen Mother's eyes showed a bit of seriousness. Could it be that the Kui family poisoned you? Xiao Chuanyang sighed softly. After Zhu Sishan committed suicide, there was an accident on the way back transporting the dragon locking goo. There is no news about the dead man and the dragon locking goo. There is no news yet. The Queen Mother was anxious when she heard this. Then why don't even I know about this? If the dragon locking goo in Su Buling comes from my Xiao family, if I don't explain it clearly in advance. Xiao Chuanyang closed the book and shook his head. The soldiers suffered heavy casualties when they defeated Baiyu. Emperor Xiaozong issued an imperial order to eradicate such poisons. My grandfather leaving them without permission is tantamount to disobeying military orders. If outsiders find out, my grandfather's reputation will be ruined. And the dragon locking goo is not only in our Xiao family. Before the dragon locking goo was lost, there were several cases of people dying from being poisoned by goo in the martial arts world. There must be a way to raise the goo. It is difficult to determine which dragon locking goo Su Buling was infected with. Telling it in advance will not only damage my grandfather's reputation, but also cause trouble for no reason. Secondly, my grandfather and father have studied for half their lives. There is no medicine to cure the dragon locking goo in my Xiao family. If Su Buling was really infected with the dragon locking goo in my Xiao family, he would be a useless person even if he did not die. Even if he confessed, he would be pissed off. How can you let me confess? The Queen Mother's heart sank, hesitated for a moment, and asked, do you know who robbed the dragon locking goo? Xiao Chuanyang frowned slightly, tapped the table with his fingers, looked in the direction of the imperial city, and shook his head again. If Su Buling was infected with the one in the Xiao family, it might be very involved, and I can't see the situation clearly. Don't let this matter spread, it will do more harm than good. If the emperor or the Su family finds out in the end, the poison was not given by my Xiao family. Even if my Xiao family is implicated in the end, I have my own way to deal with it. I can just wait and see. Oh. The Queen Mother nodded. As long as the poison was not given by the Xiao family, it would be fine. After chatting for a while, she stood up and said goodbye and left the study. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 153. Thanks to the two bosses next door, Lao Wang Brave Squirrel, for the reward. Compared with the undercurrent of debts in the court, the streets of Chang'an City have been much calmer recently. The incident at Renai Hall was nothing to Su Buling, but the aftermath was unbearable for the Jianghu people in Chang'an City. Originally, Hutai Street was in a gray area, and things were done with some caution, and the court always turned a blind eye. But this time the conspiracy to assassinate the prince was too big. While the Li family was punished, a purge followed, and even the Renai Hall was sealed. Chen Ziyi, who was the contact person in this incident, benefited from Su Buling's secret help. He only confiscated some gold and silver and then cleared the relationship on the grounds of ignorance. However, Jianghu people are cautious and do not dare to do business in the limelight. Chang'an Street is crowded with people, but the alleys that used to be crowded with Jianghu people have become deserted, and the lights at the entrance of the inn have been turned off. When the moon was above the branches, the sound of footsteps sounded in the alley. A woman wearing a Taoist robe and a weft hat on her head walked slowly to the door of the inn. The thug guarding the door outside the restaurant raised his hand to chase him away from a distance. It's closed. The inn has been reorganized recently. It's closed, and neither is anywhere else. Chang'an City has a large population of 1 million, so there is naturally more than one connecting hub between black and white like Mr. Chen Si. However, after the chaos in Hutai Street, the entire underground of Chang'an City was almost shut down, and the Jianghu people naturally had no way to go to the sky or the ground. Door, if you want to do something big, you have no chance. The Taoist nun stopped in front of the door, took out a silver ingot from her sleeve, leaned over slightly and bowed her hands. I'm not here to do anything. I'm just looking for someone. I'd like a strong man to report on my behalf. Her soft and graceful voice makes people feel like a spring breeze, and a simple word can make people spontaneously feel close to her. The thug folded his arms and hesitated slightly, looking up and down. If we were just looking for someone, it wouldn't be a big deal. After a little hesitation, we entered the inn and went upstairs to make an announcement. After a while, the door of the inn opened. The Taoist nun went up the stairs to the second floor with her V hat on. The furnishings on the second floor had a nouveau riche feel. Gold, silver, jewels and jade were everywhere. The wall facing the street must have been repaired. The paint color was different. It looked like it had been used in the past. It broke a big hole. The tall fourth master Chen was sitting in front of the sea of firewood and making tea, twirling his jade ring. His face was not too good. When he saw the Taoist nun coming over, he raised his hands and clasped his fists. My friend is coming to Beijing now. It's not the right time. The Taoist nun gave a slight nod and sat down on the small stool opposite the sea of tea. We are just looking for someone, we don't want to cause trouble. Ha ha. Fourth Master Chen shook his head and sighed, there is no one in the world who doesn't stir up trouble when they come out to make trouble. If you want to find people in peace and quiet, you can just go to the government directly. What are you doing here? The Taoist nun couldn't comment. After a moment of silence, she said, a few years ago, did a girl come to see Mr. Chen? She was taller than me, and she must have covered her face. She asked Zhang Xiang, the chief of the Criminal Investigation Department. News. Fourth Master Chen made a move. What happened at Renai Hall in the days ahead was because Crown Prince Su wanted to protect Ningqing Yi, so he took some care of him. People in Jianghu have a life to earn money, and they also have a life to spend money. This news is obviously something that cannot be told. Thinking of this, Fourth Master Chen chuckled, put down the teapot and shook his head. There is one person, but he disappeared after inquiring about it. The Taoist priest should go and inquire elsewhere. Missing. After the Taoist nun murmured softly, knowing that she couldn't ask for anything, she put down the silver ingot and got up and left the inn. At the beginning of the city's lanterns, the palace lanterns on the eaves of Chang'an Palace were swaying in the spring night breeze. Because the palace is sparsely populated, the maids in each room basically go to bed after dark. In the bathroom of the dormitory, the Queen Mother and Xiao Yi were lying together in the large white jade pool with a radius of nearly 10 feet. Threads of water mist filled the place, and fiery red petals floated on the water, swaying with their body movements. Go! Xiao Yi was lying on her side in the pool, taking the Queen Mother's bath seriously. From time to time, she would look over the Queen Mother's shoulder and then look down, with a look of envy in her eyes. Queen Mother, you should go to bed early at night and don't think too much. Look at Mrs. Lu, she is doing embroidery and gardening all day long. She is much more energetic. Humph. She just has to worry about it, so of course she has nothing to worry about. The Queen Mother's long hair was tied up on her head, and she was absent-mindedly flipping the water, with a hint of sadness between her brows. After returning to the palace from Xiao's house in the evening, she felt a little restless and kept thinking about the conversation with her brother. The dragon-locking goo coming from the Xiao family is a big trouble. Although the Xiao family cannot be harmed, the reputation of the ancestors cannot be ruined with just one word. Moreover, our ancestors have not done anything harmful to nature. It is reasonable to preserve rare treasures to prevent them from being lost, but we can't say it on the table. Xiao Xiang said that there is no cure for locking dragon goo. If this news is told to Su Buling will definitely be devastated. If he turns his anger on her or the Xiao family, he will be in big trouble. But now that Su Buling has found some clues pointing to the Xiao family, she will investigate it herself even if she doesn't tell her. If she asks again, then she won't be able to explain why she hid it. After thinking about it, the Queen Mother still felt that she should make it clear to Su Buletinling. This way, Su Buletinling would no longer be heartless and would not take it out on her or do anything to break the pot. Thinking of this, the Queen Mother calmed down her thoughts a little and sighed quietly. Xiao Yi wiped her smooth back and waist, thought for a while, and looked at the tray with food and clothes next to her with some doubts. There was a green lotus flower in it. Your Majesty, why is the golden carp missing? I couldn't find it when I was changing my bath. I thought it was lost. I asked the palace maids but I didn't even know. It would be a big deal if the palace maids stole it privately. Naturally, the Queen Mother couldn't explain where the close-fitting belly band had gone, so she just said casually. If you accidentally throw it away if it gets dirty, you don't need to report it to the treasury. Oh. Xiao Yi couldn't say anything, so she helped the Queen Mother get up from the bath and wiped off the water droplets with a towel. The Queen Mother put on ordinary green lotus flowers and thin trousers. Because she was about to go to bed, she did not wear complicated clothes. She directly wrapped a fluffy blanket around her body and returned to the bedroom at the back of the palace. Go down and have a rest. Send a message to Prince Su's mansion tomorrow and ask Su Buling to come over in the afternoon. Oh, okay. Xiao Yi bowed and walked towards the side house with a lantern in hand. In the spacious bedroom, a dazzling array of Kit Kat objects shimmered in the candle light. After the Queen Mother turned around and closed the door, she untied the blanket and turned towards the bed. Just after taking a few steps, I saw the young master in a dark robe standing in front of the duobao shelf under the dim light, admiring the objects on it. His pair of peach blossom eyes under the light were very seductive with a hint of charm. Despair. The white soft blanket fell to the ground. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 154. There was silence all around, and in the dazzling bedroom, a lamp was like a bean, emitting a gentle glow. Su Buring was dressed in a black gold-edged prince's robe with flowing cloud patterns, and a gold hairpin inserted between the crown of his hair. He was specially dressed to look handsome. Hearing the sound of closing the door, Su Buling prepared a gentle yet elegant smile, turned around and prepared to raise his hand to salute as a junior. Unexpectedly, when he looked up, he found that the white blanket on the Queen Mother's body had slipped off, and she was standing there staring at him blankly. Because she had just taken a bath, the Queen Mother's long hair was spread around her shoulders. Her emerald green lotus crotch was very tight. Her slightly loose lotus root-colored thin trousers wrapped around her gourd-like waist and legs, and she still smelled a bit of water. Hiss! Su Buletinling gasped and turned around hastily. After thinking about it, he felt something was wrong, so he quickly turned back and wanted to cover the Queen Mother's mouth. After the Queen Mother entered the room, she suddenly saw Su Buling standing in her room, and was naturally at a loss for a moment. After reacting, his face turned red and then turned white. Just when he was about to scream, he remembered that Jiao Yi hadn't gone far, so he reacted quickly and covered his mouth with his hands. Woo! Seeing Su Buletinling Hao running over anxiously, the Queen Mother was so frightened that her face turned pale and her mind went blank. Fortunately, Su Buling took a few steps and saw that the Queen Mother was calm and did not yell. She turned her back and awkwardly raised her hand to salute. "Shh, well, Queen Mother, I..." How could the Queen Mother be in the mood to listen to Su Buletinling's nonsense? She knelt down and hurriedly picked up the blanket and wrapped it around her body. Then she said, "Tap, tap, tap." She ran to the table with her bare feet on the carpet and took out a knife from between the knives. He hesitated for a moment, then pressed the knife against his neck through gritted teeth. Su Buling heard the noise and raised his hands high. "Queen Mother, don't be impulsive. I can't enter the palace too often, so I come here secretly. I don't mean any harm." The Queen Mother held a golden paper-cutting knife in her hand, and the annoyance and nervousness in her eyes were undisguised. "Get out of here. If you dare to do anything daring again, I will call you." However, after thinking about it, Su Buring must have thought that she did not dare to disturb the palace maid. Being so bold, he added another sentence. "I'll die for you to see." It probably means, "I won't let you die for your evil deed." Su Buling had seen the Queen Mother without clothes last time, and he was in a calm mood. He glanced at the copperware on the treasure rack, and saw from the reflection that the Queen Mother had wrapped herself tightly, and then slowly turned around. A friendly smile. "I never meant to offend the Queen Mother. I just found out today that the Queen Mother had returned to the Xiao family, and I felt unbearable, so I ran over to ask about the situation." Seeing Su Buletinling turn around, the Queen Mother became anxious, wrapped the blanket a little tighter, leaned on the table like a caterpillar, and glared with a cold face. "Turn around, otherwise." As he spoke, he put the knife on his neck again. Su Buring looked a little helpless, looked around, and walked directly behind the screen, looking like he would not look at anything inappropriate. The Queen Mother waited for a moment to make sure that Su Buling had no intention of becoming animalistic, and then she ran to the bed in small steps. She wanted to put on clothes, but as the Queen Mother, her food, clothing, housing, and transportation were all taken care of by the palace maids. The clothes were brought in by the palace maids every morning and put on. There was no change of clothes in the room full of strange and clever objects. The Queen Mother's face turned red and purple. She wrapped herself tightly in the blanket, took a few deep breaths, and had no choice but to suppress her chaotic thoughts. "You go back first, I will tell you after I call you into the palace tomorrow. We're here now. It's not too late to leave after we make things clear." The Queen Mother couldn't call anyone to kick Su Buling out. After thinking about it, she had to go to the soft couch and sit down. She forced herself to show the dignity that a mature woman should have and sat on the blanket. "I asked, but you are not allowed to spread the matter. I am helping you, not harming you, and I can't get angry." Su Buling stood behind the screen and said softly. The Queen Mother said it bluntly. "I know it has nothing to do with the Xiao family. Even if there is no cure, I will not vent my anger on the Queen Mother and the Xiao family." The Queen Mother wrapped herself tightly in the blanket, calmed down a little, and after carefully arranging her words, she said seriously. "In the Jiazi period when Baiyu was defeated, my grandfather did secretly hide a locking dragon goo and kept it in his home in Huainan for many years. Until the sword master Zhu Silk Mountain was killed 10 years ago, Yuz who borrowed the locking dragon goo. It was lost when we turned back afterwards, and so far there is no news. It is still unknown who robbed the dragon locking goo 10 years ago. It is not impossible that the guard ran away with the things without permission. You cannot make any suspicions. Also, there is not a single dragon locking voodoo in the world. The one in my Xiao family has no cure. If you are infected, you will be hopeless. You may also be infected by other dragon locking voodoos. In a short period of time, internally, it's better to calm down and let the court investigate. Su Buletinling frowned. After listening to the Queen Mother's patient words, he rubbed his fingers and combed them a little, and suddenly felt something was wrong. The reason why Zhu Silk Mountain was killed 10 years ago was to transport the locking dragon goo from the Xiao family in Huainan. Xiao Xiang wrote a handwritten letter to be taken away. No one expected to lose it. Su Buling frowned. The news he had worked so hard to find out was the dragon lock goo taken from the emperor's private treasury 10 years ago. It was guaranteed by the corpse of the wolf guard and the life of the eunuch Jia Yi. No matter how you looked at it, it's not like fake news. If the corpse and Jia Yi's personal and material evidence are all fake, it means that the layout is very large, and the people behind it have great hands and eyes, and have been leading him to the palace from the beginning. Thinking of this, Su Buling's heart moved, and he suddenly understood what his purpose was when he was trapped in Chang'an, unable to leave and not dead. First of all, he is infected with the incurable dragon-locking poison. He is basically immortal and will eventually become a useless person. He may die suddenly at any time if he relies on medicine to hang himself, and it is difficult to concentrate on developing military and political affairs. Therefore, the person who took action must have the intention to prevent King Su's line from continuing to grow and leading to the palace. It goes without saying who is in the palace. Su Buring turned his head and looked in the direction of Tai Chi Palace. From the current point of view, it is either that there is really a vassal king plotting to unify him, and he is treated as a pawn. Or it was because the imperial court was plotting to cut down the vassal state and needed an excuse, thus treating him as a pawn. As for whether it is the former or the latter, it is not yet known. But no matter what, the poison on his body was the same as that of the dead wolf guard, and the dragon-locking poison on the dead wolf guard must have come from the one from the Xiao family 10 years ago. Then the next thing is simple. No matter who is behind the plan, everything is based on dragon lock goo. Get rid of the poison and study in Chang'an City with peace of mind. If you study for 10 or 8 years, you will not die. No matter who is behind the scenes and what strategies are used, what can be done to him. As long as he doesn't have this knife on his head, he doesn't have to worry about being killed suddenly at any time. He can refuse any move, or even turn against the guest. Thinking of this, Su Buling's cool and calm temperament also showed a bit of excitement. After thinking for a moment, he walked out from behind the screen and walked slowly towards the restless Queen Mother who was sitting on the couch. Apart from men, the only direct bloodline of the Xiao family in Chang'an City is the Queen Mother. Yin and Yang combine. Roll your eyes. Ta-ta. The sound of slight footsteps woke up the mature beauty who was frowning and thinking. The Queen Mother was thinking wildly. She raised her eyes and saw Su Buling coming out. Her expression suddenly became angry. She hugged the blanket tightly and scolded. What do you want to do? Go back to me. I think. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 155. In the warm and spacious bedroom, the beauty sat sideways on the soft couch, looking at the young man in black who was slowly walking over. Her eyes were a little panicked, but she forced herself to be calm and behaved like an elder. Su Buling walked to the soft couch. Although he had intentions in his heart, he was not a scumbag and could not force himself on her. Even if the poison was detoxified, if something happened to the Queen Mother and it was discovered, he would still have to die, and he would not be able to overcome the hurdle in his heart. I think. Su Buring thought for a moment and sat down on the stool next to the soft couch with a natural expression. I would like to apologize to the Queen Mother. I was bothered by the news about dragon locking Gu a few days ago. I was really impulsive when I was desperate. It was never my intention to offend the Queen Mother, but the Queen Mother has to be considerate. People are about to die, and sometimes it is true. Forced by helplessness. Her voice was quite magnetic, and her charming peach blossom eyes looked at the Queen Mother with a hint of apology. Mrs. Lu couldn't bear this easygoing and elegant demeanor. The Queen Mother was stunned for a moment. Seeing Su Buling's sudden change in temperament and speaking so politely, she tightened the blanket around her and subconsciously softened her voice. Well, I think you are young and ignorant, and things happened for a reason, so I don't care about the past. Return your belly band to me, go back, and you are not allowed to break into the palace at night in the future. Su Buring chuckled, picked up the teapot on the small table, and poured 2 glasses of water. I will travel lightly to the palace tonight. It is inconvenient to bring my belongings with me. Please forgive me, Queen Mother, and I will do it next time. The room was quiet except for the sound of splashing water. The Queen Mother wrapped herself up like a caterpillar and sat on the couch, feeling uncomfortable all over. If we were living in seclusion in the palace, it wouldn't be a big deal to chat with Su Buling all day long, but now. The Queen Mother looked down at her appearance and frowned in annoyance. Then go back quickly and bring your things over to the palace next time. Su Buling naturally didn't understand what he was saying. He picked up the teacup and took a sip slowly, looking at the dazzling shelves around him. The Queen Mother likes these things. The Queen Mother took a breath. She wanted to chase people away but was afraid of offending Su Buling, so she could only say in a deep voice. What else do you want to say? Su Buling twirled the teacup and pondered for a while. I often accompany Aunt Lu, and I know it's not easy to live alone. Anyway, it's fine at night, chat with the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother can't sleep at night. When the Queen Mother heard this, she snorted lightly and wanted to raise her hand to get the teacup, but then she remembered that her arms were bare and quickly took it back. With your impulsive temper, what can I talk to you about? Last time, do you know what kind of things mean to a woman's family? If it were other women, they would have jumped into the well. Of course, I also want to jump into the well. Yes, but I am not a weak woman. If I don't teach you a lesson, I will die in vain, and I can't bear to swallow this breath. Now that you have apologized, there is a reason for the incident, so just pretend that it never happened. Su Buling listened patiently and nodded with a smile. I have to do it as a last resort. I hope the Queen Mother can understand me. In fact, I think the Queen Mother has a very good character. As the saying goes, women should not be respected by men. It is against humanity to let the daughter's family die. Isn't it right? The man's mistakes can be blamed on the victimized woman. The Queen Mother was a little surprised and thought for a while. You are sensible, but it is unfair. My daughter's family has been bullied. If she does not die, she will be looked down upon by others for the rest of her life, and she will not be able to get married. But those children of princes who made mistakes will not get anything. Heavy punishment. After you inherit the throne, you must pay attention to these things. The emperor's words are like a mountain to the common people. There is no way to resist except to bear it. You must be considerate. Su Buring smiled softly. Thank you for the teachings of the Queen Mother. Well, the Queen Mother has lived alone in Changle Palace for 10 years. She must be very lonely, right? The lustful heart is clearly revealed. However, the Queen Mother did not understand the meaning of the sentence. She raised her eyes and looked at the duobeo racks around her, with a look of indifference on her cheeks. I've long been used to it. In fact, I'm not very lonely. When I stayed in Huainan, I didn't go out a few times. I would play swings and fly kites with the maids. I grew up before I knew it. Su Buling nodded slightly and looked like he was listening carefully. Humans are social animals. How can a woman not be lonely if she is locked in a palace and has been a widow for 10 years? Although the Queen Mother felt a little weird, she couldn't help but listen carefully. She couldn't hold back some words in her stomach. After a little hesitation, she continued. By the way, my Xiao family is known as omnipotent in the mouths of Jianghu people. Jianghu knights often come to the Xiao family's village to visit and ask for help. There used to be a nearby tenant farmer came over, carrying a hen that couldn't lay eggs, and asked him how he could lay eggs. Su Buling leaned on the chair and looked very interested. Then the Queen Mother pursed her lips and smiled. What else can we do? My Xiao family is not a god, so how can I know everything? But at that time, several elders came to the Xiao family as guests and joked about the saying omnipotent. My eldest nephew, that is, Hong Luan's husband, took the hen back and studied it carefully for months. He used a lot of medicinal materials and cured the hen's problem of not laying eggs. Although it was not worth it, it relieved the qi. Sigh, it's a pity that doctors can't heal themselves. Su Buling sighed softly. I have heard about Mr. Xiao. He has been a famous prodigy since he was a child. The late emperor once said that his intelligence is no less than that of Mr. Xiao, who is unparalleled in the country. If you are in good health, you can worship the prime minister. Maybe it's Mr. Xiao. The Queen Mother's eyes showed some sadness. She was silent for a moment and shook her head. Everyone has their own destiny. I can only blame God for not being on my Xiao family's side. Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about something happy. When I was waiting to be married, Su Danking passed by Huainan once. Speaking of this, the Queen Mother frowned and suddenly remembered something important. She sat up straight and looked at Su Buling coldly. The atmosphere that was cultivated with great difficulty was gone. If I had been a little sadder, I could have comforted her and rolled my eyes. Su Buling's face froze, and his mind raced. Well, I like the Queen Mother's painting very much. But the Queen Mother knows Aunt Lu's temper. She was just over 10 years old when she met Su Danking when she was unlucky. She didn't meet Su Danking when she grew up, and she has always been upset about the Suan Hibikui incident. I took the Queen Mother's painting and regarded it as a treasure. Aunt Lu must have felt a little unbalanced when she knew about it, so I gave it to Aunt Lu, not because I felt it was ordinary. Really? The Queen Mother was half believing and half doubting, raised her hand to take the teacup, revealing she showed a piece of her snow-white wrist, then quickly retracted it, snorting lightly. Hongluan is just like that. She is sour here and there, and she wants to compete with me for everything. But to be honest, Hongluan is not bad looking, at least better looking than the ones at the bottom of the 8th. Su Buling shook his head and chuckled. Those who can be the most beautiful in the country must have outstanding qualities. It is actually difficult to determine who is stronger and who is weaker. Everyone has different preferences and perceptions, so the conclusions are naturally different. The Queen Mother listened to Su Buling's talk, blinked her beautiful eyes, and suddenly moved closer. Buling, who do you think is prettier, me or your Aunt Lu? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 156. Su Buling never thought that the Queen Mother would ask this. If you say Aunt Lu is pretty, he will probably roll his eyes tonight. If you say the Queen Mother is pretty, the Queen Mother will definitely sneer at Aunt Lu, and then he will roll his eyes. Su Buling hesitated for a long time, and didn't dare to answer this fatal question. With a thought, he stood up and said, well, it's getting late, the Queen Mother should go to bed early, and I'll take my leave first. Hey! Wait, I won't tell Hongluan, just tell the truth. Goodbye, goodbye, I'll come to visit the Queen Mother another day. Su Buling stood up, bowed, and walked to the window to leave. The Queen Mother was just aroused, and when she saw Su Buling was about to run away, she was not happy. She stood up with some dissatisfaction and wanted to stop Su Buling, but she didn't notice that the tip of Su Buling's shoe stepped on a corner of the blanket. As a result, swish. When the Queen Mother stood up, the white soft blanket fell to the ground. It bounced twice. The room fell silent in an instant. The lotus flowers sparkled in the dim light, rising and falling with their breathing, and two carps were looming under the lotus leaves. The Queen Mother stood face to face with Su Buling, slightly stunned, her face turned blood red, and then she hurriedly hugged her arms and squatted down to pick up the blanket. Su Buling naturally squatted down and pretended to pick up the blanket, and accidentally squeezed the Queen Mother with his shoulder. Then the Queen Mother lost her balance and fell directly to the carpet, and in a hurry, she grabbed Su Buling's sleeve. It stands to reason that Su Buling should be able to use the force, but at this time he seemed so weak that he fell down at the slightest gust of wind. The Queen Mother gently pulled Su Buling and made him stagger. Plop! The two fell on the carpet together. Woo! The Queen Mother was pressed down by a heavy body, her heart was shaken, she struggled in panic, but she dared not scream, she could only push and slap. Bang bang bang. Su Buling pretended to be worried and asked nervously. Queen Mother, are you okay? Did you fall? You. The Queen Mother was anxious and angry, she felt that she could not breathe under the pressure, and she could only grit her teeth and said. You get up. Oh. Su Buling seemed to have just reacted, and stood up and held the back of the Queen Mother's arm, trying to help her up. But the Queen Mother was only wearing a belly band, and there was nothing on her back. She shivered all over when her skin touched her, and she bit Su Buling's wrist without thinking, ah! Hiss. Su Buling took a breath of cold air. He had never expected the Queen Mother to be so fierce. He was afraid of hurting the Queen Mother's teeth if he pulled hard, so he could only anxiously say. Let go, dear. Woo dash. The Queen Mother had been confused for a long time, but her instinct for self-protection was still there. At this time, she stared at Su Buling fiercely, biting his wrist with a posture of dying together. Their eyes met. Su Buling frowned because of the bite of the little tiger teeth, so he had to close his eyes and said. Okay, I won't look, I'm just helping you up, why are you biting me? The Queen Mother bit for a while, and a faint fishy sweetness appeared in her mouth before she came back to her senses. Seeing that Su Buling did not show his bestiality, and was still a little impatient with his eyes closed, it seemed that she had misunderstood. The Queen Mother's expression froze slightly, and she quickly let go of Su Buling's wrist, pursed her lips, and pulled up the blanket to wrap herself up. Su Buling acted like a gentleman, stood up and comforted. The Queen Mother didn't fall, did she? He looked at his wrist, his expression serious, and frowned slightly. The Queen Mother stood up with the blanket in her arms, her heart in turmoil. Seeing that Su Buling's wrist was bitten with a tooth mark, she hesitated for a moment. I'm fine, does it hurt? Su Buling shook his head, said nothing more, turned around and left, as if he was leaving in a huff. Hey! The Queen Mother thought Su Buling was angry, and took 2 steps. Just now I fell and was stunned, I don't know why I bit you, don't worry. The Queen Mother, go to bed early, and come to visit another day. Su Buling's voice was neither cold nor hot, and he left the bedroom in a flash. The Queen Mother couldn't chase him out, so she stood there for a while holding the blanket, and suddenly felt a little embarrassed when she saw Su Buling really left. Just now, she accidentally fell down. Su Buling kindly helped her up, but he bit her back. It seems that he was ungrateful. The Queen Mother paced back and forth in the empty bedroom several times, and then walked to the phoenix bed and sat down. Her expression changed. Suddenly, she remembered something and frowned. Be good. This damn boy has no respect for his elders. The Queen Mother gritted her teeth and was annoyed for a moment, but she felt that Su Buling's attitude just now was a bit cold, as if he didn't like her. After finding out the news, he wouldn't be angry and stop entering the palace in the future, but the belly band is still in his hand. The Queen Mother was confused and stood up and paced back and forth again. It seemed that she couldn't sleep tonight. The moon was in the sky. Under the sky, the towering Chang'an was crisscrossed like a rising army, and the sea of light spread to the end of the vision. Su Buling came out of the palace and stood on the top of a high tower of a temple on the side of Zuk Street, overlooking the prosperous city at his feet. After coming to this world, Su Buling felt for the first time that the world was so clear and bright. The end of the sky was not far away, and even the stars in the sky seemed to be within reach. In the past, he was troubled by the dragon-locking goo, and he was searching for a ray of hope in the heavy fog. He dared not slack off at any time, and the burden of sudden death at any time was on his head. He had never even taken a serious look at this world. At this moment, Chang'an City is really beautiful. Although it is not clear who is the black hand behind the sky curtain, it is not important now. A keyword brought by Ning Qingyi unintentionally pulled him out of the chessboard. Thousands of plans and calculations, whether it is a vassal king or an emperor, all the intrigues are based on the dragon-locking poison that cannot be cured. As long as the poison is cured, any strategy and calculation will be in vain. After all, no matter how good the chess player is, he can't kill the big dragon outside the chessboard. However, it is obviously not a simple matter to unlock the dragon poison. Su Buling raised his hand and looked at the small tooth mark on his arm, feeling a little headache. It is definitely unrealistic to ask him to do something that requires force, at least not now. Responsibility is always more important than desire. There is still time. It would be best if it could be done naturally and get up with the Queen Mother. If he is forced into a desperate situation and there is really no way, he will also explain it to the Queen Mother. As for what will happen after that, Su Buling's eyes showed some rebelliousness. As long as the dragon-locking goo is gone, who in the world dares to act presumptuously in front of him? But it's too early to think about this now. Su Buling jumped down from the high tower, climbed on his horse and returned to the palace. He began to think about how to impress a woman in the boudoir. The Queen Mother's identity is too special. She is the mother of the emperor. It is more difficult than climbing to the sky to let the Queen Mother let go of this. I just played hard to get, but I don't know if it will work. I have to prepare well next time I enter the palace. While thinking, the wind chaser stopped in front of the stone lion outside the Suk Palace. Su Buling hummed a little song and thought about the Queen Mother. He didn't pay attention to the surrounding environment. When he entered the gate, he suddenly heard a cough in his ear, which was very cold and serious. Su Buling's footsteps froze, and his arrogance disappeared. He said to himself, "It's over. The prince is very fierce." Author, Guangguangong Zi. Chapter 157. Two large red lanterns hung on the gate of the palace, and several guards patrolled the streets outside. The light was dim behind the red lacquered door. Ms. Lu was wearing a dark green dress, with her hands on her waist, hiding somewhere neatly. Her pretty face has no expression at all, but her familiar and charming eyes cannot be concealed. She seems to be hiding 1,000 words of resentment and thoughts, which can wear down even the toughest man to the bone. "Aunt Lu, haha, why are you hiding behind the door? You didn't even notice it just now." Su Buletinling turned around cautiously, as if a man who had gone out for sex had been caught, and tried to smile as naturally as possible. Ms. Lu frowned and stared at Su Buling for a long time, until Su Buling's scalp went numb. Then she slowly took 2 steps forward, leaned toward Su Buling's chest and smelled it. The subtle fragrance of orchid is astonishing. Su Buling was a little amused. He raised his hands and looked calm and composed. Since he had suffered a loss at the hands of Song Yafu before, he had paid close attention to this aspect and could not smell like other women. After Mrs. Lu smelled it, she found that there was no wild woman smell. Her expression softened a little, and she raised her cheek and glanced at Su Buling. "Where are you going to play? You're having a lot of fun humming a little tune. You're also good at martial arts, and you can see all directions and listen to all directions. Who are you thinking about? Even a big ant like me can't even see." Su Buling raised his hand to help Mrs. Lu, but Mrs. Lu twisted her waist to avoid it, with a look like "Don't touch me, I'm not your aunt," so she had to smile helplessly. "The moonlight is nice. I went out on horseback to enjoy the scenery and bought a bottle of wine." "Really?" Mrs. Lu looked aside, not looking at Su Buling. Su Buling was helpless. He whistled and called Chai Fengma over. He took the wine gourd from it, opened the stopper and approached Mrs. Lu. "Last time, Aunt Lu gave me 2 bottles of wine. After drinking it, I couldn't sleep at night and couldn't forget it. I didn't even want to drink Duan Yashao, so I went to Sun's shop to buy it. I even gave it a name, just, well, let's call it Hongluan Urkuatu. What a mess." When Mrs. Lu heard this, she showed a bit of annoyance. She leaned over the wine gourd and smelled it. She frowned and covered her nose with her sleeves. She hummed softly, "It doesn't matter, I don't care where you go at night, just don't get into trouble." Su Buling picked up the wine gourd and took a sip. He looked like he was having a long aftertaste, nodded and said, "Don't worry, Aunt Lu, I have my own sense of discretion. What's your point of view?" When Mrs. Lu heard this, she became angry again. She raised her hand and pinched Su Buling's waist a few times. "We agreed not to enter the palace. We agreed not to enter the palace. Yesterday we ran into the palace again. You just think I'm like this, isn't it easy to lie to an aunt? You say what you say in the morning and then forget about it in the afternoon." Su Buling pretended to be in pain, grabbed Mrs. Lu's wrist, and said helplessly, "The Queen Mother is an elder, she almost stewed Xiaoting. What does it have to do with you if Xiaoting is stewed? It's none of my business. I just went over to see how miserable Xiaoting was. Scenes of boiling people alive are rare. It's so fun for Xiaoting to cry for his father and mother." Mrs. Lu pursed her lips, unable to find anything to say, so she was still supported by Su Buling. While chatting, the two walked through the veranda and came to the bedroom in the back house. There was a vermilion food box on the table in the bedroom, and the tea had gone cold. It had obviously been a while since I arrived. Mrs. Lu walked to the table and sat down. She opened the food box and took out the homemade snacks inside. "Have you eaten yet?" "Not yet." Su Buling sat next to him, picked up the snack and ate it, then said, "It's great." Mrs. Lu was a little amused. She thought about it for a moment and sighed softly. "By the way, the Queen Mother didn't teach you a lesson when you entered the palace yesterday, right? She just said some messy things. This naturally refers to having evil intentions and likes to do things that shouldn't be done to women." Mrs. Lu almost forgot about this when she was distracted by the Li family's affairs a few days ago. Yesterday, Su Buletin carried her into the palace. She was worried that the Queen Mother would say some ridiculous things that she shouldn't say. Su Buling eavesdropped on the conversation on the roof and knew what was going on. He shook his head and chuckled. "The Queen Mother also blamed me for hiding outside the city. After having a meal and chatting for a few words, she left the palace and didn't say anything else. Mrs. Lu was dubious, she was very anxious the past few days. She looked for you everywhere but didn't say anything." Su Buling thought for a moment, then chuckled and said, the Queen Mother has been bored in the palace for a long time, and she just wants to find someone to chat with. It's just that I don't have much contact with the Queen Mother, and there is nothing to say. Alas. In fact, it is quite pitiful for a woman to be locked in a deep palace for her whole life. Because Mrs. Lu was also a widow, although she often had quarrels with the Queen Mother, she sympathized with the Queen Mother's experiences. After hearing this, he thought about it and sighed quietly. Her life is worse than mine. When I stay at Xiao's house, I can always go out to relax. Whenever she goes out, there will be a lot of people following her. She used to be an unruly character, but she has been hardened into what she is now. I feel like she is suppressing her illness. He said the last sentence in a low voice, as if he was afraid that others would hear him. Su Buring chuckled, I think the Queen Mother is very dignified and dignified. What was the Queen Mother like before? Mrs. Lu thought about it for a moment. What else could it be like? She was born noble and has an arrogant temper. She is similar to those little princesses from the official family. They have basically never suffered any hardships. They get angry and act coquettishly when they don't get what they like. It's not like that at all. Sensible. Su Buling took note of it carefully and nodded, really? What did the Queen Mother like before? Mrs. Lu shook her head, poetry, songs, and prose, all the ladies from wealthy families like these. Oh, yes, she also likes those strange objects, such as the 7-piece box and the 9-linked ring. These are children's toys, and girls shouldn't touch them. But she made a lot of them, and now she has them in the bedroom, making it look like a warehouse. Su Buling seemed to have some understanding. Maybe it has something to do with the family style of the Xiao family. I see that the Queen Mother has no appetite and seems to have nothing to eat. The dishes cooked in the kitchen are not as delicious as those made by Aunt Lu. Does the Queen Mother not like to eat or has no appetite? Mrs. Lu pursed her lips, with a little pride in her eyes. She is upset after being in the palace for a long time and has no appetite. That's all. I'm still greedy. There's an old shop selling preserved fruits in Daifang. Chiao Yi would buy some every time she went out of the palace. The rouge and powder used by the Queen Mother don't seem to be suitable. Although they are expensive, their temperament is far inferior to Aunt Lu. Is she not very good at dressing up? Tisk, she didn't pay attention to this when she was a child. She always asked the maids to help her. She doesn't have good eyesight. She has a pretty face. In my opinion, she should use camellia fat, the color is more suitable. Red orchid honey is too bright and looks old, not solemn enough. Aunt Lu still knows more. Mumbling, under Mrs. Lu's tireless and caring teaching, Su Buling finally had some direction to start. The prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 158. A spring rain came quietly in the night. Until the early morning, the pavilions of Chang'an were shrouded in the rain, washing away the dullness accumulated over the winter, and everything seemed to be reborn. The sound of reading aloud in the Imperial College was overwhelming. Song Yufu looked at an empty desk in front of the school building, her eyes slightly complicated, but turned into a helpless sigh. After Su Buling entered the capital, he stayed in the school for less than a month in total, either ringing bells in the bell and drum towers, or disappearing without a trace. I didn't think it was anything before, but since she kissed Su Buling inexplicably last time at the bell and drum tower, Song Yufu felt strange in her heart. After all, it was her who did it, and Song Yufu couldn't blame Su for not letting her do it, but the matter had already happened, and if she didn't think about it, it would still flash into her mind inadvertently. The hairpin is coming back, so it stands to reason that we should have nothing to do with each other anymore. I guess Prince Su doesn't really like a troublemaker like me. Song Yufu thought silently, and after leading the morning reading, she left the school building and walked towards the courtyard behind the Imperial Academy. Only halfway through, he saw his father, Song baking, approaching with a paper umbrella and a jar of wine. Song Yufu was stunned for a moment. In her impression, her father never drank. When her mother was around, she would go around the garden. After her mother died of illness, all she could do was write, read, and give lectures. Song Yufu trotted up, hid under the oil paper umbrella, and asked with some confusion. "Dad, are you ready to go out?" Song baking always had no expression. He just handed the umbrella to his daughter and nodded. "Go home. Your uncle is back. He will stay in the capital for a few days and then go to Uulu Mountain. You haven't met your grandpa yet, so you will stay with him for 2 years. Ah." Song Yufu held an oil paper umbrella. Her little face originally showed some excitement, but it was soon suppressed by inexplicable disappointment. She had heard of Uulu Mountain many times. It was located in the Chu region. There was a small school in the mountain. Originally there was only one master who taught children from the surrounding villages, but it remained unknown. Until more than 20 years ago, 2 people suddenly appeared and became famous for their painting and chess skills respectively. The painting sage was Su Danking. Later, when everyone inquired, they found out that these 2 men came from the same school. Everyone in the world, both civil and military, rushed to Uulu Mountain to find an expert to become their disciple. Even the late emperor sent people there to invite him once, but unfortunately no one ever came. I found that rumored elementary school. There were actually 4 students taught by the old master, who were each in the fields of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. It was a pity that there were many strange people in the world, but 2 of them failed to become great talents. Song baking was one of them. However, it is not that song baking has no ability, but after he left the army, he always felt that good handwriting was useless, and that his ability should be used in governing the country. So he plunged into Chang'an City and began to pursue an official career, which has continued until today. Song Yufu has been yearning for Su Danking and her rumored grandfather since she was a child, so she was naturally excited to follow Su Danking to visit her grandfather. But the journey was long and it took 2 years. When she comes back in 2 years, Su Buring should go back to Suzhou City. Thinking of this, Song Yufu pursed her lips and remained silent. Song baking walked in the rain and glanced at her daughter. "Don't want to go." "It's not what I want to do." Song Yufu struggled for a long time, but still nodded and smiled. Song baking sighed and was silent for a moment. It's natural for a girl to get married if she wants to get married. But Dad doesn't have any dowry, and your grandpa is great. When the time comes, you can tell the old man who you want to marry, whether it's a prince or a noble family, they should give you face. No way. Song Yufu's face suddenly turned red. She shook her head, held up the umbrella weakly and stopped talking. The father and daughter walked around in circles and came to the outside of the old house on Zuji Street. Under the rain curtain, Su Danking, who was wearing a scholar's robe and holding an ink-black oil paper umbrella, showed a bright smile from a distance. "Bai Ching, I haven't seen you for many years, but you still remember my hobby and are interested in it. This is Yufu. She was only 2 or 3 years old when I saw her, and she is so big now." Song Yufu was actually a little nervous. After all, painting saints tomorrow was so big that almost no one knew about it. After taking a quick look, Song Yufu stepped forward and bowed. "Uncle Song. Haha, I'm still as good as when I was little." Su Danking consciously took the wine jar from Song baking and looked at the somewhat shabby little house. "But the house was still new when I left last time. In the past 10 years, I haven't seen you change it. The Imperial Academy has a lot of money to pay for the wine and monthly salary, and living here is too shabby. Su Danking is a well-known libertine in the world. If it weren't for Nyoda's fame, Song Yufu would frown." Song baking unlocked the door and entered the courtyard. He was always serious about words and ignored the prince's children. How could he pay attention to this unofficial fellow disciple? He said calmly. You'll live here these days, otherwise you'll sleep on the street. It's not like you've done this before. Su Danking put away the oil paper umbrella and looked around. For the sake of my master coming from the same school, I condescend to live here. To be honest, senior brother, I just want to think that no one will say anything about living in Tai Chi Palace. Your Majesty, I was given a pen a few days ago, begging me to come out. Song Yufu followed behind and couldn't help but murmured in a low voice, Uncle Su, sealing a pen is like sealing a sword and a box in a world of martial arts. It seems that you can't come out again according to the rules. Su Danking touched his beard and smiled elegantly, Uncle, I am a scholar. How can I abide by the rules of the world? There are not many officials who retire and return to their hometowns and are re-employed. But illiterate I must have character. If you say that you have closed your pen, you have closed your pen. After retiring from old age and returning to your hometown, you come back to work. It is different. Su Danking blinked and turned his head to look at Song Baking, junior brother, does this count as a tiger father and a dogless daughter? Why do you accept death like you? Song Yufu smiled and stopped talking. Song Baking had no intention of chatting. You have offended too many people, and they are all women. Women are always petty and vengeful. Be careful when you go out this time. Don't be like the boss and the second child, who didn't even leave any incense behind. Su Danking sat down at the table and sighed, you have to finish the painting after you leave the mountain, at least 8, otherwise it will be difficult for the Holy Emperor to communicate with you. You have been in the capital for a long time, do you know the beauties who are famous recently? Let me know, go back home and take care of yourself, so you don't have to die outside. Song Baking shook his head, turned around and went to the side room to make tea. After her father left, Song Yufu naturally became more courageous. She pursed her lips and said, Uncle Su, look at me. Su Danking knew how to look at people as well as he could draw them. Naturally, he saw his daughter's family's little thoughts and raised his hand and waved. There is no benefit in having a famous name. If you don't have a good family background, you will inevitably suffer disaster. Even if you have a good family background, it is not necessarily a good thing. Just marry honestly and don't think too much. Song Yufu said oh, thought about it for a while, glanced at the side room, and whispered. Uncle Su, can you draw someone for me? I want to keep a portrait. Su Danking chuckled lightly and said in an easygoing tone, does Yu Fu have someone to recommend? I am worried about this matter. No, Song Yufu hesitated for a moment and whispered, it's a man. Male. Su Danking had no experience and had seen all the beauties in the world. He glanced at her and shook his head. How do men paint? If this spreads out, people in the world will not say that my taste has changed and I can't paint. Song Yufu was a little excited and said seriously, Uncle Su, don't worry, I promise not to spread your paintings out, just take a look for yourself. Su Danking thought about it for a moment. He was already cynical, so his niece made such a request without pushing it back and forth. He chuckled. That's fine, but I don't want to draw ugly people. At least they have to be more handsome than my uncle. That's natural, much better than Su Bajun. Su Danking touched his chin and smiled a little far-fetched. Haha, then I have to take a good look. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 159. I have not been able to sleep since last night. The results are out now. The first order is 1300. The subscription ratio is very good, which is not disappointing. When I was writing Little Dudu before, I was very envious every time I saw a silver box floating in the sky. I fantasized that one day in the future, I would also have a silver box floating in the sky. But I never thought it would come so soon, just like the first time I received a reward from the leader. It was April 1st. Little Dudu had an average subscription of more than 160. I was almost writing the finale. At noon, when I was having lunch, a reward suddenly popped up on my phone, with many zeros behind it. I was stunned at the time. It took me a long time to react. I still remember the feeling of almost dying of brain congestion. That was the first leader in my life, the big boss of Tiantang Xiaoman. Then today, the big boss of Tiantang Xiaoman became the first silver ally in my life. For the first time, I gave him all. Well, I guess he won't agree to the flesh compensation, so I can only repay him with updates. In fact, it has only been 3 months since April 1st, but it feels like a lifetime to me. From writing silently on a single machine to the support of all the big guys day and night, every vote, reward, and comment on this chapter can be said to be an encouragement, which makes me full of energy. And the wave of support when I opened a new book cannot be described as encouragement alone. There were 6 alliance leaders and 10 helmsmen at the beginning of the book. It felt like being whipped by a small whip, which was incredibly exciting. I thought that was already the peak of my life, but the support of all the big guys yesterday still shocked me and I didn't sleep for a whole day and night. I would like to thank Heaven's Little Gate for the Silver Alliance reward. Thank you. The meat is really delicious for the 3 alliance leaders. Yes, 3 alliance leaders, 1 person supports half of Aunt Lou's character list. Thank you Abai, you stop for the 2nd alliance leader reward. Thank you Brave Squirrel for the alliance leader reward. Thank you SYFCT for the alliance leader reward. Thank you Old Wang Next Door for the alliance leader reward. Thank you Mujian Li for the alliance leader reward. Also, thanks to Yu Fan for the 30,000 reward. Thanks to Luoluo and Generous for the 20,000 reward. Thanks to 1.82 meter tall Big Fool for the 20,000 reward. Thanks to Book Friend 160929233519419 for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Winged for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Guangguangongzi my big brother for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Xioxioxiamianlang for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Make Up a Nickname Casually for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Book Friend 160925175758121 for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Dutch Mouse for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Name is a Pearl for the 10,000 reward. Thanks to Yugixin for the 10,000 reward. And thanks to the following big guys for their rewards. Adventure Ball. Let him gather and divide. Book Friends 202001182054374988. 2 File. Olentaumo. Book Friends 201904230038574421. Please pity me in the book shortage. It's raining. Book Friends 202007012155188794. Book Friends 202006251835265223. Book Friends 201709010644046113. Time accompanies my loneliness. Let you call Baba. King's in Yuhua. Buying Spring Scholar. Bridal Chamber Unbeaten 606. Urugu. Chushi Biao 2333. Ah, Master, you can't. Tao 333 Shaku. Ajming. Leo. Kong. Amumuani. Dream Back to Sulan. Floating Life 0606. Rainy Night with a Knife. Suzai. Book Friend 201707111225422746. Young man in white clothes is more beautiful than snow. Fluffy Chow Chow. Late at night, the moon falls and the stars turn. People in the world call me Day. A corner of peace. Weather, 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 weather. Remia. Kagai. Sky thief. Moon drunk in the frequency of Saint C. Purple maple autumn moon. Release pigeons in the starry sky. Miss what I miss. Book friend 201809280003346333. Pull the wind into my arms little brother who loves to show off. You fly to the other side of the city. Purple maple swan ye. Messed up in the shells. Ship out today. Chu Yi King Mei. Paper drunk beauty. Taro boss. Blood-handed man slaughters Ning Chang Gong. Xiaomo 12138. Book friend 2002001191339599437. Book friends 201804091248222924. Origin of destruction. Name Zuji. Blue Nightmare. Tonight is the night. Ji Muriki. Fireworks, black. Squat done. Du Vying. Ding Ding Adventures. Dandanzi F. Recharge every day. Nailst. Multiption. Hindi. Pudan must love. Chengquiwa. Harem all. Golden Autumn Dan. Olentuimo. Yingyu. Snow in the Sound. My exclusive nickname. Assassin Juwurki. Moon Shuchen. Yuyeting. Silver Tea, M. A little alpaca. Yachin Mumanjai Y. Xialulu. Xiokun's hair band. A cup of wine for the snow in the evening. Heavenly Book Vei. Julong Xianking. Jiyemuriki. Himenaria. Fat Dog. Luat. Book friend 2020611001950838. Book friend 2020701225542678. Book friend 2020701184949642. Book friend 202002291609146062. Book friend 202001172249555065. Book friends 2020010713351875. Book friends 201912311030333855. Book friends 201910250110000023. Book friends 201907251927521773. Book friends 201804012234444494. Book friends 201801172243333380. Book friends 2017603120910724. Book friend 1504122122882842. 100,000 Tales. God's Academy. Where does the Green Mountain end? Chiaosu. Chi Yuan. Panguzi. Nicholas. Ista. Molly Mary Hong Ah. A glimpse of the beauty. Life is like a dream. Jing Cotton Cloth. A book every few days. Fantasy is free. Drink the strongest wine and sleep with the wildest dog. Changed my name to show that I am an old bookworm. Go up to the high building alone to enjoy the bright moon. Dai Dai de Zuho. Chen Cha Cheng. The crocodile who loves diving. Sherry Birkin. The stars are about to turn and the sails are dancing. 1 2 3 4 5 6 pt. 58256544. Liu Zhuang. And QQ Book Friends. Lucky. White Horse opens Wujiang. A little bad. Finally, special thanks to Ibuki is my wife. Because there are a lot of big guys who reward, please remind me if there are any omissions. I can't see any news about rewards on QQ and other places, and the only comment was drowned out by the chapters. Please forgive me if there are any omissions. I have finished talking about the things that excited Guan Guan. Next, according to the set policy of adding more chapters. 1 Silver Alliance, 100. 8 Alliance Leaders, 80. 16 10,000 Rewards, 16. Apart from the 21 chapters added yesterday, it is currently 284. 31 chapters have been returned. Well, this book should be returned, right? It has just been put on the shelves, and it can be ranked at the front and get more exposure, so I still hope that everyone can vote for recommendation and monthly tickets. Guan Guan can only update more while ensuring the quality. Thank you all. The Prince is very fierce. Author, Guan Guan Gong Zi. Chapter 160. February 2nd, the dragon raises its head. It is early spring in February, and it is the season for animals to do that again. The lingering spring rain is endless. I am afraid that after a rain, Chang'an City will be full of greenery inside and outside. After entering the palace late at night last time, Su Buling rested at home for a few days. First, he and the Queen Mother are not related after all. If he enters the palace too frequently, it will inevitably attract the attention of those who are interested. Secondly, the possessiveness is too obvious and will inevitably backfire. It is better to leave the Queen Mother alone for a few days and wait for her to send an invitation. The lotus hides the carp is still in her hand, and the Queen Mother will definitely not be able to bear it for long. Sure enough, the Queen Mother in the palace waited for a few days. Seeing that he had no reaction at all, she obviously couldn't hold it back anymore, and invited him to Changle Palace tomorrow on the pretext of going to the palace to sit. This time, he had to prepare in advance to enter the palace and be sincere. As for the effect, we can only talk about it when the time comes. At noon, Su Buling walked out of the palace holding an oil paper umbrella. Because it was raining, he didn't ride a horse. He walked through the streets of Chang'an City on foot, watching all kinds of things that he had never seen in a year. Because of the beginning of spring, Chang'an City was obviously much more prosperous. The number of foreigners on the streets increased sharply, and a wide variety of goods gradually arrived in Chang'an, starting the year-after-year trade. Although Northern Qi and Dayo were hostile, Dayo lacked horses and Northern Qi lacked iron. The two sides had been in a stable confrontation for more than 60 years without a war. Bilateral trade had been opened up to some extent. Counting the days, the envoys of Northern Qi would soon arrive. As for the last time, the envoy Hu Yanja of the Baisha Kingdom, although the things were not cheated away, the Ministry of Rights lost an adult. The Minister of Rights was pointed at by Qi Xinggan and scolded for malfeasance. He almost scolded the Minister of Rights to death at the court meeting. It is probably impossible to pass off fake goods in the future. The drizzle hit the green tiles on the eaves of the street. Su Buling came to the back street of Daifang with an umbrella and stopped outside a small tea stall. There were few pedestrians on the street. Because it was not time yet, people from the nearby brothels and gambling houses gathered at the tea stall on the street, listening to the storyteller's eloquent words. It is said that the Iron Spear Man fought with the Prince of Suwang for 300 times, and the world changed color and the sun and moon lost their light. At the moment of life and death, the Prince of Suwang waved his sleeves and shouted, "Here comes the knife," and the surrounding 100 wolf guards drew their goose feather knives and killed the Iron Spear Man with their knives. Good. Pa pa pa. The tea shop was full of cheers. The storyteller told them mistakenly entering Renai Hall with great emotion, and countless listeners were excited. Under the eaves next to the tea stall, a little girl in black stood on tiptoe and read with great interest, looking proud of it. Su Buling was so upset when he heard it, but ordinary people like this, and no one would listen to it if it was not exaggerated. He did not care at the moment, walked behind the girl in black, and covered her head with an oil paper umbrella. Zhu Manzi was concentrating on work and slacking off, and suddenly felt that there was someone behind him, thinking that he was blocking the way, so he moved 2 steps to the side and continued to listen to the book on tiptoe. Ahem. A familiar cough sound came from her ear, and Zhu Manzi froze, then a smile appeared on her cheeks. She turned around hurriedly, looked up at Su Buling who was close at hand, and said crisply, "Mr. Su, why are you here?" Su Buling curled his lips and turned to walk to the street. "Let's go to Xianzizai and buy some things, together." Zhu Manzi was happy to do so, and ran to him excitedly to take the oil paper umbrella, and raised it high to cover Su Buling's head. "Okay, it just so happens that I made a lot of money with Xiaoning a few days ago. What kind of rouge does Mr. Su like? I'll treat you." Su Buling took off the wine pot from his waist and took a sip, looking at the excited Xiao Manzi. "I don't need rouge." "Oh." Zhu Manzi walked in the rain with an umbrella, thought about it, and suddenly came to his senses. "Buying rouge?" Zhu Manzi's expression changed a little, blinked her big eyes, and asked casually, "Mr. Su, who are you buying rouge for?" "Of course, I'm buying rouge for a woman." "Oh." Zhu Manzi pursed her lips, hesitated for a moment, and pretended to be indifferent. "Hey, Mr. Su is so handsome, whose girl is so ungrateful that she actually asked you to run errands in person?" It seemed that she was defending Su Buling. Su Buling secretly laughed and pondered for a while. "Pa!" A slight crisp sound sounded in the rain curtain of the alley on the street. Zhu Manzi shuddered, her face turned red, and her buttocks were burning. Su Buling remained calm, walked slowly with his hands behind his back, and looked like it had nothing to do with him. Zhu Manzi frowned, stared at him with big eyes, followed him slowly, endured for a moment, and still muttered in dissatisfaction. "Mr. Su, what are you doing?" Su Buling said calmly, "There are mosquitoes." "Mosquitoes?" Zhu Manzi looked around, looked at the chilly rainy day in February, and was full of doubt. "Are there any? I have good ears and eyes, and I just saw one, and I killed it." Tianzhen's face was cold, and what he said was true. Zhu Manzi half believed and half doubted, quietly rubbed his sore buttocks, and said angrily, "Mr. Su said there are, then there are." Su Buling said very seriously, and continued to walk under the oil paper umbrella. The two walked a distance in the rain. Zhu Manzi had a strange expression, and when he was about to walk out of the alley, he suddenly bumped Su Buling's arm with his shoulder. Su Buling raised his eyebrows and turned his head. "What's wrong?" Zhu Manzi bit her lower lip, showing a bit of shyness. She lowered her head and hesitated for a while, then said in a voice like a mosquito groaning, "Mr. Su, I'm not stupid." Su Buletinling looked puzzled and gave her a confused look. Zhu Manzi pursed his lips, thought for a while, and bumped Su Buling's shoulder again. Su Buletinling's face darkened. "Can you try hitting me again?" "Just try it." Zhu Manzi clutched the hem of her skirt, looking unconvinced, and tried to hit Su Buling again. Unexpectedly, this time it missed the target and crashed directly into Su Buling's arms. Ah dash! Zhu Manzi was hugged and pressed against Su Buling's chest. His smile suddenly turned nervous, his eyelashes trembled slightly, and he did not dare to raise his head while holding the oil paper umbrella. With a smile on his lips, Su Buling hugged the tight little girl, raised his hand and patted her again. "Manzi, I treat you as a brother. What do you want to do?" Zhu Manzi was tightened by the arms around his waist, his eyes were embarrassed, and he shook his head. "I'm a woman. Brothers of the opposite sex." Zhu Manzi's face turned as red as an apple, and he didn't struggle. He just shook his head as if he was bored. Su Buling raised his hand and lifted her chin, looking puzzled. "If you don't want to be brothers, what do you want to do with me?" Zhu Manzi's eyes averted, and he held the oil paper umbrella for a long time, and then he forced himself to calm down and smiled. "Being a retainer." Mr. Su told me to be a retainer. We are all people of great status in the world. We must do what we say. Su Buling held the little girl who was not very heavy with one hand, feeling warm on his chest, and shook his head seriously. As the saying goes, there is no such thing as a free lunch. I agree, but maybe my father will not agree. As a disciple of Prince Su's mansion, his skills are at least as good as Nanking Yi's. You are not good at martial arts, and you don't know how to make plans. How can you be a disciple of Prince Su? Zhu Manzi looked a little aggrieved, rolled his eyes, and said softly, Actually, Xiaoning is more beautiful, more skilled in martial arts, and more famous. I for a long time, I couldn't think of anything better than Nanking Yi. His face was burning, so he could only say vaguely. Anyway, oh, Mr. Su, don't you want to buy rouge? It will get dark later. Anyway, there is no one in the palace. It's okay not to go back tonight. Let's talk slowly. Zhu Manzi blushed and held it in for a long time, but still didn't dare to say anything. She twisted around to get rid of Su Buring's arm, then ran behind Su Buring and pushed Su Buring out of the alley. Let's go, let's go. We have to go back to the yamen in the evening. If you go back late, your monthly salary will be deducted. You can't delay. Su Buletinling was a little amused, shook his head, and was forcefully pushed out of the alley by Xiao Manzi.